let's also get in a global opinion on the markets and a very special guest joining us all the way from US, Teresa C. Barger, the co-founder and senior managing director at Kartika Capital. She joins us on the show right now. Teresa, such a pleasure speaking with you today. We've been celebrating India and, lifetime highs for the market. Tell us, what is your weightage in Indian equities right now as opposed to other emerging markets?
Yes. Well, we are very overweight India. We are a player that does not pay much heed to the benchmark at any rate, but we have a third of our portfolio in India.
US markets too are fresh high. Do you sense further gains are likely to come there? What's your sense?
Well, I think that it's a little bit frightening in the US where stocks are, and the proof will be really in earnings. So I think we're going to look very closely at where earnings are. But obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but from my perspective, I think the markets did get ahead of themselves with the so-called Trump trade, because we all know that it's extremely difficult to get infrastructure programs through, extremely difficult to pass tax reform, extremely difficult even to streamline regulations when you're dealing with a Congress, and also people in the executive branch who may disagree among themselves. So I think we're going to be looking very closely at earnings and see if the U.S. companies can keep up their earnings without share buybacks.
When do you expect the earnings revival to come through, both for India and for U.S. companies?
Well, I think they're very different. I don't see any coupling between the U.S. and the Indian market, and that's one thing we like very much about the Indian market. I think that the earnings story is very much that we're seeing is company by company. Obviously, demonetization had a greater impact on some companies than others. So, for example, as you know, we are in Eicher, and they continued to sell 60,000 plus motorcycles in November and in December. They had great year-on-year growth in both the months of demonetization, and they've done very well in 2017 as well. We're also in TVS that really got flattened during demonetization, but is now recovering. And so each is a unique story. But for us, the huge opportunity in India is coming from formalization. We see that as a unique theme in India.
Right. Teresa, since you are such an India bull, the Indian consumption story is being chased by many investors. Do you see merit in that theme, given you do have holdings in the likes of Page Industries as well as Marico?
Yes, we like the consumer story very much. We think that the kind of quintessential emerging markets story does exist in India, where you've got demographics going in your favor, you've got high GDP growth going in your favor, you've got reform going in your favor. I really do believe that all the reforms that were put in place leading up to demonetization were very cleverly put into place, and now allow the government to take on this new step, which I call formalization, but really includes all sorts of things, including more tax compliance, including the GST making trade more efficient. But I think that India's really has all of the right ingredients for the consumer to do well, for middle class growth to continue, for urbanization to continue. I think that a lot of the pieces of the puzzle are there in India.
Okay. Teresa, tell us, how is it that you're approaching the Indian infrastructure theme? You do have holdings in names like Shree Cement, and of late we've been seeing a big runaway move in infrastructure, cement, and all the allied spaces.
Yes, so our experience is that infrastructure always takes much longer to get going than people would like. And so we're not counting on the big national government infrastructure programs coming online soon. although I am counting on them coming online over the next few years. But what we are seeing is that affordable housing is being built in many different places in India. Local governments have been working for years. Rajasthan has done a great job on their roads. We're seeing canals being built. And so we're seeing a lot of, I would say, under the radar infrastructure that is being built, plus, of course, the bigger stories of the railways, the roads, and some other very big projects. And we really don't see many ways to play it except for through cement. And as you know, we have been in Shree Cement, which has just done an amazing job. They're now at 28 million tons capacity, and in the end of 2 years, should be at 40 million tons capacity. They have been remarkable in their ability to add capacity. They also have a lot of cash. It's been a concern to us because we think that cash can be a cash drag and lower one's return on equity. But they have done a very good job of capital allocation, and they've used their cash hoard, if you want to use that word, quite defensively. And the stock has just continued to do extremely well.
So do you believe in the Indian banking resurgence? What's your take on the NPA issue?
Yes, I mean, we think the banking sector is extremely interesting. If you look at the overall numbers for India, you see very lackluster loan growth. But if you take the PSU banks out of that, we're seeing private sector banks growing their loan portfolios at 20%, which is very high and is what we saw in the Philippines up to a year or two ago, what we saw in Mexico up to a year ago. And so this is really phenomenal growth. And we do think that, and obviously they have a lot of liquidity at the moment because there are a lot of deposits. So we are very much like the Indian banking story. It's also a leveraged play on growth, and growth in India is one of the best in the world. So overall, we think that the Indian banking story is a very good one. On the NPA problem, I do think it's one of the biggest problems that the government faces as a general overall economic problem for India. I think the RBI is very aware of it, and we can see that they have made many attempts to deal with it. So far, we haven't seen any kind of big nuclear option for the NPAs, but I guess I have faith that they will erode and that they'll work on it over time. We would certainly love to see perhaps maybe something bolder happening to clean up the NPAs.
So which company excites you most in the financial space?
Well, I guess I would be disloyal not to say Ratnakar Bank because we went into that before it IPO'd, and it's been just a spectacular success since it's been introduced to the stock market. And trades at a lower multiple than some of the very famous, well-known banks, which are trading at some of the highest multiples in price to book of any banks in the world. If you look at something like Kotak Bank or HDFC. We ourselves cannot invest in banks or any company of that high a market cap because we are small and mid cap ourselves. So we haven't really delved into those bigger cap banks. But we have looked at the NBFI space again. It's one we know quite well. We've been in before, and we are considering that as well.
Right. Teresa, I have to get in your view on Indian pharmaceutical companies as well. Given the risk-reward ratio right now and given the US FDA clampdown on most of these Indian pharma majors.
You know, our view on that is that really it makes sense to look at the pharma companies as a portfolio. So if you had the space to have 3, 4, 5 pharma companies and you took a portfolio approach, then you could deal with the fact that you've got this regulatory uncertainty, particularly coming out of the US FDA. But for us, we have only 20 companies in our whole portfolio globally. So it's just very hard for us to take that kind of approach. Although if we could do anything and had no constraints, I think that's the way we would look at that sector. There are obviously some very talented people in the sector and some very good management teams in the sector.
Right. Teresa, I have to ask you, what's your key investment strategy when it comes to equities right now? Where is it that you're finding value?
Well, I think our strategy for investing in Indian equities is equivalent to what we look at anywhere in the world. We're looking for companies with very, very high integrity promoters. That's absolutely key for us. Then we're looking for very good management teams. Then what we would love to find is companies with a really good place in their product market. And when it comes to this, you want to find a company, ideally, that has a lot of runway for growth. And this is where I think the formalization theme comes in India. We have companies in India whose primary competitors are in the informal sector. Our companies obviously are paying their taxes and abiding by all the rules in India, and a lot of their competitors are surviving on very thin margins, and when they have to pay taxes, they may not survive at all. So it could be an amazing time for the listed companies that are formal in India. So we're, that's a fill up once you find companies that are very good position in their product market. I should also say for good balance sheets, generally, because we're not very far out the risk curve. And so we're looking for companies that are not very highly levered.
Right. Okay, Teresa, closing comments then, and taking my chances here. Any stocks that you may be looking at next when it comes to India?
Well, of course, we can't talk about the companies that we are considering, but I would say that we don't really see any other country that is fighting corruption, that is really using e-government the way that India is. No other country that has this great sweep of formalization that really could be a huge game changer for that country. India is alone in that. So I think that you'll continue to see Kartika very active in India, continue to see it as one of the best plays in the emerging markets for all of these themes, including the budget, the GST, the e-payments, the tax compliance, and a very good urbanization and consumer story as well.
Okay, Teresa, great speaking with you. Always great to have you on the show, and thanks for joining in with your views on all the sectors and stocks that you are liking.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.